The mechanism for pricing those variations is not as easy. And then finally, it's sometimes difficult to compare bids at the tender stage. So imagine you've got that primary school I talked about, and you've done your lovely sketch scheme, just like you do for your final review, and you send it out, and then you get 4 prices back. And one's sort of like 4 million, and one's 3.5 million, and one's 2.5 million, and one's 2 million. And you go, whoa, 2 million, great, we thought this was going to be 3.5, we'll go with them. But the trouble is, the more questions you ask of the person who's put the £2 million job in, you realise they're using all sorts of cheap materials, they've just changed your lovely aluminium windows to UPVC, they've found the cheapest bricks known to man, and all sorts of things have happened. Now, those things I've just described, you think, well, any old idiot could spot that, so what's the problem? But there's many subtle things which are very difficult to detect. One of our pet hates is folding sliding doors. As a practice, we've done lots of educational buildings, and very often they have folding sliding doors, and those folding sliding doors, and they can be, 3 or 4 meters high sometimes, like you see in big hotels, etc. They're meant to give you, 48 dB separation, and that's really important if they're between 2 lecture rooms. Now, first of all, they might give you 48 dB in a laboratory condition, but the way they work, they're on rollers from the top, and you kind of move them and you swing them along, and then you turn a handle and they all lock. They have little rubber vanes. So cheap ones last about a year before they start falling off and no one can use them. Good ones can be there for 20 years as long as they're treated with respect, and you train people how to use them, they're just fine. So one of our pet hates is people trying to use a different product from the one we tend to like to use, which I think is from BSAM or someone like that. And no, Alco, that's it, Alco. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It's a Rolls-Royce product. It can cost 1.5 times the price of something that seems to be the same. We stick with it like glue because it's not of any use to us for a client to come back to us in 5 years' time and say those doors you specified are rubbish. So that's one where it seems a picky thing to be thinking is important, but we know from long experience it's really important. And there's many, many things like that in our job that are important, and it's difficult when you get a big contractor's proposal back to understand what's going on. So that's one of the disadvantages. So we now have the pleasure of Mike Cunningham joining us. So Mike, you get to sit in the special seat. So as I explained at the beginning, Mike is a director is your company? You're not a partner? Director. Limited company. Of Mersey Design Group in Liverpool, with how many staff roughly?
10 to 12, brought one of my stars with me this morning.
Excellent. So we even have an employee, so we can ask the employee questions.
She's really good.
What stage are you at?
I'm about to do a part 3.
You're a tutor.
Am I? But you haven't done it this week?
Yeah, no, I'm
Doing it in September. Okay. So Mike's practice was very, very similar to my practice. In fact, we have competed against each other on more than one job where we're bidding. Mike has tended to do more health work, but more recently done education and housing. Big raft of... So he's a really interesting person to work for because you will see things from beginning to end over 12 months. You'll hear what's going on, you'll hear the rough and tumble of the arguments between the client and the architect or the contractor. And so, do you want me to go through these or do you want to just talk to him? I don't mind what you
ask
do.
me questions. I'll blather on and talk on.
Okay. So, the first one is to do with briefing. So you're going to have to think back now a few lectures. What's
Sorry,
it?
Can I ask what stage you guys are at? Where are you up to? Are you third year? Alright. Okay.
So there will be a year out next year.
Okay. So, well, client briefing and the brief. So I'll just blather.
Well, yeah, so basically, if you remember, I told you, clients do not hand you this piece of paper.
Yeah.
It's a bloody nightmare getting a brief out of people. So now it's Mike's perception on clients and how they brief you.
Yeah, I think just I think one of the key skills that you need to take forward is courtesy and consideration. Because what's happened for 3 years in your life at the moment is that a microphone?
Yeah,
Does
yeah.
that help?
Well, no, but you need to remember it's taped, so don't tell any horrible stories about clients.
Well, the first time I ever met Peter Farrell, fortunately he wasn't wearing that jumper. I'm glad you've taken it off, Peter. I can relax now. Courtesy. For 3 years, you've been given a piece of paper, and it said, this room is this big, this wide, it's going to sit on this site, da da da. Sometimes you do get that. It only usually happens on really big schemes, where it's a multi-million pound project, and they've had to think that through at the outset. Even when they thought it through at the outset, the brief is actually quite frequently incompetent and not considered properly. So part of your job as an architect is to courteously, I'll come back to that in a bit as well, because this job is not really about designing buildings so much as building relationships and learning how to talk to people and learning how to get the best out of people for their benefit and for your benefit. So if you get a brief that's rubbish and you say, do you know what, this brief is rubbish? You're going to really put barriers up between you and your client, or you and your builder colleague, or whoever it is. So the first part of developing a brief is listening. And you've really got to learn to listen, and it's really hard. I still struggle, and I'm 55. Try to listen to what people say and not jump in with your own ideas too quickly. That's really hard too, because often you see something and you think, oh, well, we could do this and this and this and this and this. And before the poor person who's maybe never worked with an architect before, but is really good at what they do, and has lived, perhaps it was a house extension, a very simple thing, they've lived here for maybe 10 years, and they've watched the sun come up every day. You haven't, but you think you're smart because you know where the North Point is. And there's a tendency to jump in really quickly and say, oh, but you can't do that. You can, but you won't get very far. So take time to listen to what other people are saying. Write it down, write it down, write it down. You should all be writing notes all the time when you're talking to clients. And then, after you've had time to consider it, write up what they've said. It's not your house, it's not your building. When it's finished, and let's hope it all went really well and all this process was followed successfully, when it's finished, you'll never see it again. You'll have some photographs. If they really like you, you might get invited around for a cup of tea. If you do see it again, it's probably because you didn't get all this stuff organised and they pulled you in because there's a problem. So it's theirs, and the courtesy must be to them, to listen to what they want, and to then reflect back to them. And also, in that reflecting back to them, do not leapfrog their thoughts, because what happens, and I get this frequently in the office with younger architects, they'll say, I know the client said they wanted this, but I've thought of this, so I've drawn this instead. And I say, well, that's great, that's a good idea actually, but if we present that to the client without first showing them their thoughts made manifest, they will feel that we've ignored them and left onto something else. Whereas, if we show them what they were thinking and say, we drew what you were asking for, and here it is, and while we were drawing it, we came up with some additional ideas, and that will often lead to a really good dialogue with the client. And one expression, I'm going to get you to do this, right? I want you all to say after me, oh, that's a good idea. Can you do that? That was very half-assed. Can you do it again? Oh, that's a good idea. Excellent. Now get used to doing that, because what we do as architects, we're very, very vain. We're very, very egotistical. We like to think we thought of everything. We like to think we invented the brick. We didn't. Often people who are nothing to do with architecture, who've never trained as architects, who know nothing about it, can come up with really good ideas because they've lived there for 10 years. Or they might be a bricklayer who spent the last 20 years doing bricklaying, and he will know far better than you ever will how to fit bricks together. So get a little bit of humility into your conversations, and this comes back to courtesy, and it comes back to respecting the other people, whoever they are, which is absolutely critical. And that will lead you to a much better brief, a much better design process, and ultimately a much better product and project. Waffled for a bit.
Okay.
Next one.
So when you're doing your design projects, particularly this last one, you know you sometimes get access to Ted Ruffle or one of the other structural engineers in order to work out blah, blah, blah. I don't know whether you get access to environmental science people, but I'm interested in practice, Mike, the extent to which you rely on the extended design team, and also how early on you bring them in to the team meetings.
Well, it's a two-edged thing, that, because they are really important and critical members of the team. So don't think I'm the architect and then I'll tell the structural engineer what to do. And certainly don't think I'm the architect, I'll tell the mechanical or electrical engineer what to do, because you will really fall over if you try to do that. It depends on the project. So if we were doing an operating theatre, now you can imagine an operating theatre is a very technical, clean environment. And one of the main things in an operating theatre is mechanical extract. The air must be clean, there must be no infection opportunities in the room. So I would say at the very beginning, from the first meeting, you will need a specialist mechanical and possibly electrical contractor working with you. On the other hand, if you go to do, and we've just had this exact experience, Harriet and I are working on a school extension in South Liverpool, and we went to the first meeting, and the client body, which I'll come back to maybe in a later question, the client body said, where's the structural engineer, where's the mechanical engineer? And I had quite a battle to go, well, hang on a minute, we haven't actually got a design yet, so I can't afford to waste your money, Mr. Client, on the services of the structural engineer and the mechanical engineer, who were already appointed, who are waiting in the wings, because we don't know what we're designing. So we went to a meeting and we changed the design, didn't we? And we actually changed the design quite a lot. Now, had I brought the mechanical engineers to the first meeting and then got them rolling, and had I brought the structural engineers to the first meeting, they'd have designed a structure and they'd have designed the services, and they'd have designed them for a building that was never going to be built. Because by the second or third meeting, we changed the design quite a lot. Now, they wouldn't say, oh, that's okay, the staff, I will still pay my staff this month for designing that project, and I will pay them again next month for doing it again for no more money. They would be upset, quite rightly, and they'd say, hang on, you gave us these drawings, you said this was the design, we have now designed let's say, a structural frame to accommodate this, and now you told me that we need to design another structural frame next week. So I had quite a battle with the client to say, I'm not bringing structural engineering, I'm not bringing the mechanical engineering yet, until you tell me this design is frozen. The day it's frozen, frozen means not that it's really cold, frozen means that it's fixed. As far as we can fix it at this time, there's a fixed design. I'm sure Peter's referenced that, and if he doesn't, he will. Because when you started talking about it as it came in, design changes. You have to get to a point where there's a drawing, and it's drawing 101, revision B or C or D, and everyone says, that's what we're building now. And that's an important legal document. And one of the things that you don't appreciate at college at all till you get out into industry is every single drawing that you do has and that you issue, not the ones you do around the office, but anything that goes out of your office has a status of some sort, and it is in effect a legal document, and it can be labelled construction. And once you put construction, or you can put client agreed design, you can call it what you like, but it has a status. So if we agree, as we did ultimately get to, a design, which was a massive improvement on the initial briefing document we were given, we were then in a position to say, right, this can now be worked to. As everybody signed it, it's a legal agreement, in effect, you're all going to build to 101 revision D, and that's it. And that's called a frozen design then, when the client can no longer make changes and has to understand, and again, dialogue, communication. Thank you very much, Mr. or Mrs. Client. That's brilliant. We've agreed that now. Are you all happy with that? Yeah, right. I'm going to go now, and now I'm going to instruct all the people that I didn't instruct yet to get working on the details. And you'll pay them once, and they do the job once-ish. And then you roll forward. So it's a really subtle thing. Don't underestimate the importance of the other consultants on the team. They're really important. They're equal players. You have a coordination and a lead role. Because you're the lead doesn't make you better. It just means you're the one pulling the strands together. That's your job. That's what you're supposed to do. Doesn't make you better. They'll know more about structures. They'll know more about mechanical, electrical, acoustics. We're currently doing a dental practice. We've got a specialist dentist, dental equipment advisor. There's all sorts of different specialisms that you'll pick up and you'll work with at different times. But it is a lot of learning. And then the other part of it is, as I just said, I had a client wanting to bring them in. So then you have to have an ability to have this dialogue with the client which says, no, for these reasons we shouldn't. And you've got to, this is where you've got to learn courtesy. Because sometimes you do want to scream at people. And sometimes they want to scream at you as well. Sometimes quite rightly. So just bear that in mind, and you will watch when you go out into industry where they bring these people in, and then how they behave, you know. Difficult.
Okay, so now I'm going to ask Mike just to give you some tips on dealing with these other people in the team that you deal with. Some of them generally tend to be very helpful people, others can have other attributes, and so what I want you to talk about is what it's like dealing with a structural engineer, the service engineer, and finally the cost consultant. Okay. How you rub along with them and what they're sort of they are like as animals.
Yeah. Well, out of all, it's very interesting this because you've got this very isolated point of view at the moment, and it's all the architect, as though that was the only thing that mattered. And I'd sometimes describe it as like being a giant pie, and you have a slice of the pie that's you, and that bit you're really good at, and you know all about, or you ultimately will know all about everything to do with that. But place you over here, and you're lost. Like as if someone was trying to ask you to fly a plane or something, you're that lost, you know. So you have and the architect, sadly, sometimes think that he owns the whole pie and understands the whole pie. We don't. We understand a little tiny bit of it. So all these other components that go to make the complete picture, the complete circle, are absolutely essential. They're not all needed at day one, because that would be crazy, but they are essential. And the person most allied to the architect in terms of a design is usually the structural engineer. And I get on very well with structural engineers. I have a... Hello. You're either really early or really late. Okay, you go back in if you want. Does anybody know him? Wrong guy. Okay, structural engineers, very interesting people. They come, like the architect does, they tend to come from a technical point of view. Technical, we like putting things together, we like forming shapes, we like creating things. I think pretty much more than any other consultant, the structural engineer is in that world. When you get, what I really enjoy working with structural engineers is when you get one who is interested in the concept of what he's designing. Some engineers are very much, structural engineers are very much just wanting to get a very simple construction. So they will try and sometimes constrain what you want to do. I wouldn't want to overestimate that as though there's a world of structural engineers trying to stop us being wonderfully creative. They're not. But go to a structural engineer and you must have some idea of what it is you want to achieve. So you know, you have structures lectures presumably, do you? Yeah, you do.
Yeah, they do, yeah.
So you don't have to understand every calculation, okay? You don't. And you don't need to know how exactly to calculate the depth of the beam. You might for college, but in real life, you don't necessarily have to know that. Helps if you do. Helps you have your dialogue better with the guys. But what you do need to understand is the structural concepts of how framing works, how roof trusses work, where is the force going? Where's the force going? You know, if you draw a section through a building, which you'll be doing all the time, in your 5 minutes when you can't be bothered doing anything else, get a red felt tip pen, print it out and draw on it, and work out the lines of force. And then go see the structural engineer that you've got at college working for you already, and say, I was thinking it worked like this, is this right? And he might say no, he might say it's rubbish, but he won't be able to resist telling you the right one. And then once you know that, you'll remember that. So in order for you to have a dialogue with any of these people, you've got to understand the concepts. So don't think, oh, it's the structures guy, he can sort that out, it's the M&E guy, he can sort that out. You've got to understand these concepts. So a good structural engineer is great because they'll tend to get on board with you, and you say, look, I'm really trying to achieve this, whatever it is, a big opening, I want the beam recessed so there's no downstand on the beam, I want it to feel really open, I want no column. You know, I don't want a column in the middle of this lecture theatre. And they'll quite quickly get on board with that. And that approach I would encourage you to take with all consultants. So the acoustic consultant, you don't need to know everything about acoustics, but you do need to understand that a little thin wall is not going to stop sound as much as a big thick wall. Sometimes, I mean, I've done recording studios in the past, and the building control who were looking at it were really concerned that the sound of the instruments would be keeping people awake 2 streets away. But we were like, no, we can't have even the sound of, you know, a car driving past affecting us, so we've got to build it in this, and we've got to really make these great thick walls. And then you've got to learn how, and so you don't need to know every calculation, but you need to at least think, oh, big, thick, dense things are going to stop sound. You should also know about standing waves in acoustics, so they you know, don't put parallel walls in a recording studio because that will lead to standing waves. These are principles and concepts. I know you didn't say acoustician, but I'm just trying to think of other consultants. Mechanical engineering and electrical engineering. Again, you're always trying to find the best people. The industry struggles with enlightened mechanical and structural engineers, I would say. You might not agree, Peter.
No, I do.
We sit in an office and we go, right, who should we ask to quote? Oh, that's another thing. As architects, you're often asked to put forward other consultants. You're usually the first one the client meets, not always, but usually. And they say, well, if you know any structural engineers, can you recommend a firm to me? Can you recommend mechanical and electrical engineers? So we often get the opportunity to pick the team, which is marvellous. But the conversations I've had over the years with so many people, do you know any good M&E engineers? Do you know any good M&E engineers? And there's a culture, rightly or wrongly, that they receive our drawings and they want to design. We do have some enlightened ones who want to work with the concept. And then you get into this concept versus detailed design, and that's a bit complicated for you at the moment, I guess. But we often want them to be a bit more thoughtful and imaginative, and they just want to get this drawing done quickly and get it out of the way, and we struggle with that sometimes. But they have an important role to play. And the more technically complex your building is, the more important those people are. For a house extension, to take one end of the one extreme, your M&E consultant is likely to be something between the builder on site and his electrician, and they'll discuss things through. And maybe the plumber will discuss things through. That's at the most basic. At the other end, if you're doing a hospital, the mechanical and electrical design can drive the whole thing, because the The height of the building will be driven by the massive amount of ducting and services that they've got to put in. So those guys need to be right in at the beginning, and they need to be enlightened. And if you do get the chance to choose, you know, and it won't be just now, but as you're going through your careers, you know, really think carefully, will these guys give me the quality of service that I really want? Blather, blather.
Okay, so last one, and I didn't tip you off on this, but I don't think it's going to be hard for you to answer.
Short nonsense.
So these chaps and ladies are all going to be doing their year out next year.
Mm.
I want you to give them a tip, a survival tip for being in the office.
I didn't talk about cost consultants, so I'm going to come back to that.
Well, we love them, Mike. All I need to know is you love them to bits.
Don't underestimate the cost consultant. I'm going to just I'll think of a tip. Just on the cost consultant thing, without going into it too much, very, 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 very important. This is all driven by money. What I try and do is I try and keep an eye on the money as well. A bit like we're talking about the other professions. Don't just think, oh, it's a dark art, it's a cost consultant. It's not that difficult, but we tend to avoid it. If you can get your head around, oh, it should cost this much, and it's quite easy to find out how much a building should cost because the square metre rate's knocking around. If it's 100 square metres and it's £1,500 a square metre, it's £150,000 to build it. That's pretty simple, and that's the kind of thing. And don't let them run away like it's a dark art, because they do tend to do that. Again, learn some concepts. Give yourself the power to have a dialogue with them. And if you ask them and you're at a great stage, the great thing about where you are is, right, and you can ask questions like crazy, and nobody thinks you're an idiot. If I ask the questions, oh, 55, who doesn't know that? I tend to ask them anyway, because I know enough to know that when I ask a question, it's not a general thing that I should know usually. So I will. Sorry, can I just ask what that stands for? Can I just ask what that is? Can I just try not to destroy the meeting? If you're in, you will be in meetings, and you will be the little quiet one in the corner when you get out into industry. But make a note of every single thing you don't understand, and when you get out, the colleague who was with you in the meeting say, "Can we go through this?" Don't leave it for hours. Just try and get it as soon as you're at the meeting. What does, I don't know, PQQ stand for, or whatever it is, you know. So you're in a great position for asking questions. Like sort of leads into a tip, doesn't it? Tip for a year out. Harriet, you're really competent and capable.
I was going to say, yeah,
How long have you been with Mike?
about 6 months now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Tip for these guys, because this is your second experience, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it's actually my third. I did 2 years out.
Feel free to just stand up,
Come and stand
Come on,
here,
come
Harriet. Come and sit here.
because this is really, really
I'll go
useful.
right, right.
It's really useful.
Sorry. Harriet did the half marathon yesterday. Did anybody else do the half marathon yesterday?
Hey, well done.
Well done, well done.
Still standing.
It's freezing, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, no, I mean, you kind of already said, I don't know if I can get on this chair. It's ask loads of questions and find someone that will give you the time. I've found Mike that will give you the time to actually explain the stupid questions, or ask the stupidest questions, and ask them 10 times, and hopefully you'll find someone in an office that will humour you and just and write everything down as well. That's really important. But yeah, just ask all the questions, because as you were saying, there's not a stupid question.
No stupid questions.
Yeah.
And ask the same question 10 times. And even if I do it now, I say, I'm awful sorry. I know I've asked you 5 times, but I just can't remember for some reason. And write it down again. And before you ask them the 7th time, just check your notes, you know.
I've got a list of abbreviations in the back of my notebook now that I try and just refer to, because in meetings they're so used to all these, especially in healthcare and in schools, they'll just say all these abbreviations all the time, and you're just like, what are you talking about?
What's career-wise, what's been the best and worst moments so far in your post-university career? Well, you know, so
university.
these are going to year out, so give them like, oh God, this was a really bad day, but this was a really good day kind of thing. I'm putting you under pressure.
Since university, I would say the good days are the days that you get a dialogue with lots of different people in the office. So we've been working on a kind of master plan scheme for this could be a really exciting project, and it's we've had meetings in the office where everyone will sit down and talk you through that, and it gets you actually really excited, and it makes you sort of remember what you're sort of doing it for, and that's quite a nice thing, because often I think as architects we often just sit and stare at our screens and get very you can get very isolated in just sitting at your desk. So it's a really nice opportunity when you can actually talk to people that you're working with, and I think I feel quite lucky that we're at a small practice, that you do get to know what other people are doing in the office, and you do have those conversations, and that's really important because I don't know anything. So,
you do.
So I think that is important that you start to understand that, and the more you can talk and ask questions.
And a bad day?
Bad day. It's probably something to do with window schedules.
No, that's some gross.
Some kind of.
Okay, we're going to have to tie it up. But actually, Mike, what you shared with us last time, which I thought was very interesting, was that we all continue to make cock-ups. Do you want to share that with them this time?
Yeah. Well, since I was here about a year ago, I made about 1,000 really bad mistakes. There is a myth. There is a myth of this perfect architect, and certainly when I was at college, and it'll be dripping into you now from all your tutors and lecturers. They'll be implying that there is this great Frank Lloyd Wright second coming, and it could be any of you, and it's not. It's not. You're going to fail, and you're going to get to 30, which is like ancient for you guys, probably not some of you, but and you think, oh my God, I'm 30 and I'm not Frank Lloyd Wright 2 yet. What's happened? And then you're going to get to 40, and you still won't be. And you know what? You're going to go into meetings some days, and you're going to make a complete idiot of yourself. And you're going to come to the office some days, and you're going to be grumpy, and you're going to get it wrong, and you're going to make mistakes, and I make them all the time, don't I? Yeah. And I go, oh, bollocks, and then I fix it, or don't fix it, or try my best to fix it. And this is really good advice for your year out, because you will feel under pressure that you've got to arrive in this office. The office is thinking, by the way, the officers are all thinking, oh, here's a year out person. They seem enthusiastic, and we can do something with them. They know nothing. You think, I'm here to save the office, step aside. Okay, so you've got exact opposite points of view, and about a week into the office, you're going to go, oh, I know nothing. And you're not going to be able to, hopefully you will be able to say, actually, do you know what? I haven't got a clue what you've asked me to do. Someone asked me to do a door schedule when I was 2 weeks into my year out, and I didn't know what a door schedule was. You don't know what a door schedule is. You might think you do, but you probably don't. It's a really boring drawing, but it's got to be done. And a lot of the work that is done is, in the nature of putting a building together, there's a lot of formulaic stuff. And if you don't have to do a door or window schedule, I sat there for a week, and then I asked someone, this is a bloke thing, by the way, this is one of my little things. Blokes, guys, male people in the room. Men will sit there and think, I should know how to do this. So if I ask, I've done this so many times, and I don't want to be challenged on it, because I've tested it to destruction. At 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, if I have a chap working for me, a male person working for me, and I ask him to do something, and he doesn't know how to do it, somewhere on the Tuesday afternoon, I'll prod him, and he'll say, I don't know how to do that. So we've lost a day and a half. Females, generally, if I ask them to do something on a Monday morning, they'll have a look at it, they'll try and work it out. Somewhere about 9:10, on the Monday morning, they'll go, sorry mate, what? I don't, and I'll go, oh yeah, I meant this here, just copy that. Oh, and they go, all right, brilliant. So by the time we get to Tuesday afternoon, they've done the task, and they've done 2 more tasks. That is obviously a generalization, but bear it in mind, it's great to ask questions. Don't think you've got to be a hard man or hard woman or hard anything. Don't think we think you are, because we don't. We know what you are, and we've all been there. And by the way, I'll go and do something today or tomorrow or the next day, and I'll be like that. I'll be in a meeting going, I'm the architect, watch out for me. And in about 5 minutes, someone will make me feel ridiculous. And that just keeps me level again. And I'm a human being, and I've got a wife, and I've got 2 kids who give me a nightmare. I'm eventually at 55 able to afford to extend my house because I've been skint most of my life. And that's the reality. And a lot of my meetings, I don't know if you see me do this particularly, but a lot of my meetings, I start or introduce into the dialogue who I am.
Yeah.
And people stop seeing the architect and they start to see the human being. Because all of you are sitting here, and a little bit of you is going, architecture. And